Hello, I'm Teacher Omar. Let's talk about science. These are the specific learning objectives from the most essential learning competencies. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to observe why carbon is a unique atom, differentiate organic from inorganic compounds, discuss alkanes, alkenes, and alkynes based on the presence of bonds, infer the different ways in naming and writing aliphatic hydrocarbons, and recognize the different functional groups based on their general structure. Now, let's check your prior knowledge about the lesson. Directions. Read carefully each question, then write the letter of the correct answer on your paper. Now let's check the pre-assessment. Did you get a perfect score? Nice to hear that. Okay, let's start. I want you to look at the following materials. What do they have in common? Carbon is not a difficult element to spot in our daily life. For instance, if you have used a pencil, you've seen carbon in its graphite form. Similarly, the charcoal pieces used to cook barbecue are made out of carbon. And even the diamonds in a ring, it is a form of carbon. In this case, the carbon has been exposed to high temperature and pressure in order to form and become a diamond. What you may not realize is that about 18% of our body is also made of carbon. In fact, carbon atoms make up the backbone of many important molecules in our body, including proteins, DNA, RNA, sugars, and fats. Now let's talk about carbon atom. The atomic number of carbon is 6, meaning it has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and obviously 6 electrons. It is represented by the symbol capital letter C. Carbon is found under group 4A, period 2, and is a nonmetal. Carbon atom is considered to be special and unique because it can bond with other carbon atoms to an almost unlimited degree. It is because its atom is very small in size and can conveniently fit in as a part of a larger molecules. The carbon atom has 4 valence electrons, or 4 electrons in the outermost shell. Because of this unique configuration, it is easier for the carbon atom to share its 4 electrons with another atom or atoms than to lose or gain 4 electrons. Each carbon atom is identical. They all have 4 valence electrons, so they can easily bond with other carbon atoms to form long chains, or what we call aliphatic hydrocarbons, and form rings, or what we call aromatic hydrocarbons. What's in? Word up. Arrange the scrambled letters to form the term that is being described in each statement. Write your answer on the separate sheet of paper. Here are the answers. What's the difference between organic and inorganic compound? Organic compounds are a group of compounds that contain the element carbon and hydrogen. The 4 kinds of organic compounds are hydrocarbons, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. and they perform various functions in a living cell. While inorganic compound is a compound that does not contain both carbon and hydrogen. Many inorganic compounds do contain hydrogen atoms such as water and the hydrochloric acid produced by our stomach. In contrast, only a handful of inorganic compounds contain carbon atoms. Carbon dioxide is one of the few examples. Types of organic compound. 1. Carbohydrates are biochemical that is made of one or more simple sugar molecules. Living things, most especially human, use carbohydrates as an energy source. These are the examples. 2. Lipids are biochemical that does not dissolve in water. Fats, oils, and waxes are examples of lipids. One of the functions of lipids in living things is to store energy. These are the food source of lipids. 3. Proteins are huge molecules with complex structure that permit them to take on significant functions in organic chemical reactions. It is usually present in animal products, though it also exists in other sources such as nuts and legumes. Proteins do most of the work in cells and are essential for the organization, function, and regulation of the body's tissues and organs. 4. Nucleic acids are the chief information-carrying molecules of the cell. The term nucleic acid is the overall name for DNA and RNA. They lead the development of protein synthesis and control the inherited characteristics of every living thing. The different types of organic compounds such as carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, or the organic compounds in general, are known as carbon-containing molecules. These carbon-containing molecules or organic compounds make up the cells and other structure of organisms that carry out different life processes. From the complex organic compounds that carry out different life processes, now let's have hydrocarbons. The simplest organic compounds that contain only carbon and hydrogen atoms. The simplest hydrocarbon called methane contains a single carbon atom bonded to 4 hydrogen atoms. What is unique about carbon is that it can bond to itself in many different ways. Carbon atoms can form long chains like this. It could also form branch chains and rings like this. There are 3 types of bonds formed between carbon atoms. 1. Single bond is a covalent bond formed by 2 carbon atoms sharing 2 electrons. Compounds contain only single bonds between carbon atoms are called alkanes. 2. Double bond consists of 2 covalent bonds formed by 2 carbon atoms sharing 4 electrons. Compounds that contain at least 1 carbon-carbon double bond are referred to as alkenes. 3. Triple bond consists of 3 covalent bonds formed by 2 carbon atoms sharing 6 electrons. Compounds that contain at least 1 triple bond between carbon atoms are called alkynes. Now let's name aliphatic hydrocarbons. In this table contains prefixes used in the International Union for Pure and Applied Chemistry system to show the presence of 1 to 20 carbons in an unbranched chain. If a hydrocarbon contains 1 carbon atom, we use the prefix meth. If it contains 2 carbon atoms, we use eth, and so on. Now let's apply this in naming alkanes. The alkanes are named by combining a prefix that describes the number of carbon atoms in the molecule with the root ending "ane" to denote a single bond. For example, let's name this condensed structural formula. As you can see, there are 2 carbons, so we use the prefix "eth" plus the root ending "ane", so therefore, this named as ethane. Another example, let's take a look at these hydrocarbons. It contains 6 carbon atoms, so we use the prefix hex plus the root ending "ane", so we name this as hexane. Now let's have alkenes. How do we name alkenes? Write the prefix first to describe the number of carbon atoms and combine with the ending "ene" to denote the double bond. Let's have an example. There are 2 carbon atoms in the example, so we use the prefix "eth" plus the ending "ene", so this named as ethene. What about alkynes? Like alkanes and alkenes, alkynes are named by combining a prefix with the ending "ine" to denote the triple bond. Let's take a look at this example. This hydrocarbon contains 2 carbon atoms with triple bond. Since it contains 2 carbon atoms, we use the prefix "eth" plus the suffix "ine" to denote the triple bond. So this hydrocarbon is named ethyne. There are different ways in writing aliphatic hydrocarbons. One is through molecular formula. It describes the precise number and kind of atoms contained in one molecule of a compound. These are the general formula for the different classes of hydrocarbons. For alkane, we have CnH2n plus 2. For alkene, we have CnH2 times n. For alkyne, CnH2 times n minus 2. Wherein n is the number of carbon atom. Let's have an example. We have methane under alkane. Methane contains 1 carbon atom. So n is equal to 1. Then we substitute the given to the general formula. So we have C1 H2 times 1 plus 2. And it is equal to CH4. And that's the general formula or molecular formula for methane. Another example is for ethene. Ethene is hydrocarbon that contains double bond with 2 carbon atom. So N is equal to 2. Then we substitute the given to the general formula, wherein we have C2H2 times 2. And the answer is C2H4. And that's the molecular formula for ethene. Lastly, we have ethyne. It contains 2 carbon atoms. We substitute the given to the general formula. We have C2H2 times 2 minus 2. Then we have C2H2. That's the general formula or molecular formula for ethyne. The second way is through line angle formula. A line represents a carbon-carbon bond and a vertex represents a carbon atom. Let's have an example in writing the line angle formula of the following hydrocarbons. We have propane, butane, and pentane. This is the line angle formula for propane with 3 vertices, butane with 4 vertices, and pentane with 5 vertices. Remember, That vertex or vertices represents the number of carbon atom in writing the line angle formula. Another way is through expanded structural formula, which shows all the bonds connected to all the atoms within the compound. Here are the examples. The fourth way is through condensed structural formula. It shows all the atoms but omits some, or all the vertical and horizontal bonds, thus making it easier to write in a single line. This is the example. Let's take a look at the bigger picture of hydrocarbons. The simplest organic compounds, which are composed solely of carbon and hydrogen. Hydrocarbons are divided into two, the aliphatic hydrocarbons and aromatic hydrocarbons. The aliphatic hydrocarbons consist of straight or branched chain of carbon atoms, while aromatic hydrocarbons contain a benzene ring as part of their structure. We can subdivide aliphatic hydrocarbons into two groups based on the types of bonds. Saturated aliphatic hydrocarbons are hydrocarbons in which all of the carbon-carbon bonds are single bonds, or alkanes. Unsaturated aliphatic hydrocarbons are hydrocarbons which contains at least one double bond or triple bond that are alkenes and alkynes. What's new? Introduction to the functional groups. A functional group is a group of atoms or single atom that is substituted for a hydrogen or a hydrocarbon. These groups generally determine the types of reactions and properties of more complex compounds. These are the different functional groups or class of compounds. We have alcohol, phenol, ether, amine, carboxylic acid, aldehyde, ketone, ester, and amide, with their corresponding general structure and examples. Now let's discuss them one by one. Alcohols are hydroxyl derivatives of hydrocarbons formed by replacing a hydrogen with the hydroxyl radical. The general form is ROH, wherein R represents the hydrocarbon and OH represents the hydroxyl radical. For example, if one hydrogen of ethane is replaced with hydroxyl radical, it is now called ethanol, or popularly known as ethyl alcohol. Another one, we have propane, replacing the hydrocarbon with hydroxyl radical, so it is called propanol. Since the hydroxyl radical bonded on the second carbon, we should indicate it and call it 2-propanol, or popularly known as isopropyl alcohol. Now let's have phenols, are hydroxyl derivatives of hydrocarbons formed by replacing a hydrogen on the benzene ring of an aromatic hydrocarbon with the hydroxyl radical. Phenols have the general formula AROH, where AR represents an aromatic hydrocarbon. Below is the typical example. Phenol is also known as carbolic acid. Danger alert! Carbolic acid is a very poisonous chemical substance. Ethers. An ether is a hydrocarbon derivative of water, where the two hydrogens of water are replaced by hydrocarbon groups. Thus, ethers have the general structural formula of ROR, where R and R represent any two hydrocarbons, which may be alike or different. For example, this diethyl ether. The oxygen is bonded by two hydrocarbon groups. William Morton discovered the anesthetic properties and administered the ether or diethyl ether as general anesthesia in 1848. Another class of compounds are amines. They are result from the replacement of one or more of the hydrogen atoms of ammonia with hydrocarbons and have a general formula RNH2. Examples: methylamine, ethylamine, and a more complex one, morphine. Morphine is used as analgesics, that is, painkiller. Now let's have carboxylic acids. Carboxylic acid is a COOH group in which carbon atom is bonded to an oxygen atom by a double bond and to a hydroxyl group by a single bond, and have a general structural formula RCOOH. For example, this ethanoic acid, or also known as acetic acid. Vinegar is no less than 4% acetic acid by volume, making acetic acid the main component of vinegar apart from water and other trace elements. Another class of compounds, aldehydes. The aldehyde functional group contains a carbonyl group bonded to a hydrogen in which a carbon atom shares a double bond with oxygen atom, a single bond with a hydrogen atom, and a single bond with another atom or groups of atom. Aldehydes have a general structure of RCOH. For example, methanol, or also known as formaldehyde. This formaldehyde is often used as disinfectants and preservation of deceased body. Now let's have ketones. The functional group of ketone is a carbonyl group bonded to two carbon atoms. In the general structural formula of each functional group, we use the symbol R to represent other carbon group bonded to carbon to complete the tetravalence of carbon. The general structural formula of ketone is RCOR. For example, acetone, or also known as propanone, is a very good solvent and cleaning fluid such as nail polish remover. Now let's have esters. Esters are formed from the reaction of carboxylic acid with an alcohol and have the general structural formula RCOOR. Esters are derivative of carboxylic acid in which the hydrogen of the carboxyl group is replaced by carbon group where R and R can be the same or different hydrocarbon groups. An example is ethyl acetate, which has the sweet odor of pineapple, mango, and oranges. And lastly, we have amides. Amides have an amino acids attached directly to a carboxyl group. They have the general formula RCONH2 or RCONHR. Organic compounds present in nylon, silk, and wool contain hundreds of amides group. Nylon 6 is made from the monomer caprolactam, an example of complex amide. Now these are the different class of compounds or functional groups with their general structure. Now let's check comprehension. Do the activity number 3 entitled Carbon Compounds. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.